got to give Carmelo Anthony a little bit of credit. The reason why is, if I was Carmelo Anthony, I wouldn't have been so nice on my radio show. I would have dropped the damn hammer on Phil Jackson. The fact here is, Phil Jackson making a book, he wants to sell. He wants to make money. He doesn't need money because he's still getting paid by the New York Knicks. Yes, James Dolan is still paying him and Derek Fisher, who, by the way, James Dolan and Phil Jackson are good friends. Phil Jackson was the one that told James Dolan to hire Derek Fisher. How did that work out for the New York Knicks? He was sleeping around with other people's women. All right, we all know Derek Fisher and the whole story behind Derek Fisher. Then we had Jeff Hornacek. Another bad story about that. But the fact here is, to give Carmelo Anthony all this, and Carmelo Anthony come out on his own radio show and make it seem like it was nothing. He did bring up the LeBron James posse thing, and we all knew they were going to bring that up because Carmelo is very good friends with LeBron James. He sticks up for
LeBron's hurt, right?
Yes, but that's not even about this.
No,
we're talking
about from like 8 years ago.
We're talking about something that happened 8 years ago, and which is going to be in the book November 4th. He probably has his thoughts to his whole thoughts to the posse and what he was saying about that. And I'm not saying Phil Jackson's a nice guy, because he's not. But I've heard Michael Jordan speak very highly of him. I've heard Scottie Pippen speak very highly of him. I've heard Tony Kukoc speak very highly of him. I've heard Shaquille O'Neal speak very highly of him. Kobe Bryant loved him. But the one guy that didn't love him and didn't like him was Carmelo Anthony. Why is that? And here's the thing. I think Carmelo Anthony was a great Knick. He was sensational. He was a great offensive player. He didn't like Jeremy Lin being there. When Jeremy Lin was taking the spotlight away from him for 2 weeks, when Lin Sanity was out there, did Carmelo like that? No, he wanted Lin out of there. And that's when Houston, at the end of the season, gave him a $40 million contract to get him out of there. And, of course, Lin didn't want anything to do with the New York Knicks after that. He was taking the $40 million and getting the hell out of New York. Jackson wanted to keep Jeremy Lin there. And I don't even remember if Jackson was there with Jeremy Lin. But I know Jackson, when that came out and Jackson was talking about it, when they brought it up, the media brought it up about Jeremy Lin, he said that Jeremy Lin was a great player and that the Knicks should have kept him. But you see, you had to make LeBron James, I make Carmelo Anthony very, very happy. He was the superstar player. He was the player. That was the team. That's how they built it. J.R. Smith came to the New York Knicks because Carmelo wanted him there. Amari Stoudemire wanted Carmelo there, and I got to give Amari Stoudemire a lot of credit, because if Amari Stoudemire doesn't go there, Carmelo never goes there. But you could go back and forth with this story, and I don't know. I'm going to read the book. I'm going to check it out. I got to give Carmelo Anthony a little bit of credit, not attacking Phil Jackson the way he did. And Jadakiss sitting there and saying that, oh, you were a man about things. I love Jada. I think Jada is one of the greatest rappers of New York history. He is sensational. His little crow sound and going out there on social media. I love Jadakiss. Love everything about him. What the hell does Jadakiss know about this story and behind the scenes what was going on with him and Phil Jackson? We know Phil Jackson didn't like Carmelo Anthony because he thought Carmelo Anthony was a prima donna. And again, I do believe, even though Kristaps Porzingis said that Carmelo Anthony was a great teammate, that Carmelo Anthony didn't want Kristaps Porzingis there. Because at the time, Kristaps Porzingis was becoming a superstar player for the Knicks. They called him the unicorn. His own good friend, Kevin Durant, called him the unicorn. You think Carmelo liked the fact that there was another star there taking the shine away from him? No, he didn't. So I don't think Phil Jackson was wrong about that. Do I believe that Phil Jackson wanted to get rid of Carmelo Anthony? Yes, I do. Who was holding him back? James Dolan. I remember Carmelo Anthony went to visit the Chicago Bulls, and Chicago gave him a nice pitch. Told him we give you whatever you need and whatever you want for you to come to New York. Did it work? It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Because Carmelo Anthony was going nowhere, because James Dolan was going to pay him the most money. Remember when he was with the Nuggets, and he had a choice to go to the Brooklyn Nets or the New York Knicks. He had no interest in going to Brooklyn. Why? Because he wanted to go to Madison Square Garden. He wanted to, quote-unquote, go home. Remember that? The P. Diddy song, I'm coming home. Yeah, the fact here is, when you think about it, Carmelo Anthony got what he wanted. He got Jeremy Lin out of here. He got Kristaps Porzingis out of here. He was the lonesome dove. And to come out here and say that Phil Jackson was the reason why it didn't work, I agree with Carmelo. Phil Jackson wanted to only coach home games. He came out and said that. The only way he coaches his team is home games. And he said, why did you come here if you weren't going to take the keys and ride it all the way to the finish line? He's right. But after the fact, the only thing that I take shots at Phil Jackson is drafting a point guard, Ntilikina, that made no sense when he could have gotten the Spider, who's right now one of the best players in the league playing for the Cavaliers. As we all know, the executives and the organization wanted to bring him in because he's a New York native. And boy, oh boy, could you imagine Mitchell on this team? There's a lot of mistakes the New York Knicks made. And I think the mistakes lie not from Phil Jackson or Carmelo Anthony. It lies to the owner, James Dolan. Because James Dolan was the one that paid these guys. James Dolan wanted Carmelo Anthony. James Dolan was running this organization. James Dolan wanted Derek Fisher. James Dolan met Phil Jackson at a party and offered him the most money an executive ever got. It was James Dolan. It was nobody else. Carmelo Anthony didn't tell James Dolan to bring in Phil Jackson. James Dolan told James Dolan to bring in Phil Jackson. That's the facts. And the fact that Phil Jackson took shots at Carmelo Anthony and the beef has started, I don't think there's any beef. I think Carmelo Anthony, the one thing I could say about Carmelo Anthony on this whole take is he handled it very, very well. Something that I didn't think he was. I thought he was going to drop the hammer. And then he says everybody knows what was going on in the... So tell us what was going on behind the scenes. But you know what? Carmelo did the right thing. There are things that you don't say outside of the locker room. Things that were spoken to and spoken about outside of the locker room with the players. And a lot of players agree with that. As we all know, the Kevin Garnett Cheerio story. Remember that? I think you remember that. Kevin Garnett on the basketball court calling or saying something about Lala, his wife, and saying his wife is like eating Cheerios, whatever he said. Honey Nut Cheerios, whatever the story is. And Carmelo denies that that's what he said. Kevin Garnett on the Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce podcast, he didn't deny it. So there is no factual thought to it, but he didn't deny it. So who's telling the truth? Is it Carmelo or is it Phil writing the book and saying, I wanted to trade him. I didn't think he was good for the organization. I didn't think he was good for the team. I don't believe the triangle offense fit with this team and this roster. The ISO, it was more the way they're playing. Right now, the Knicks are playing ISO with Jalen Brunson. It doesn't work. It didn't work here. Now, when you look at the Golden State Warriors, it works because they have shooters. When you have shooters on your roster, you can play the triangle offense because you get guys that can spread the floor. Carmelo Anthony was an isolation player. The players that they have on the roster, they weren't shooters. There was one. Steve Novak was the only shooter on this roster. They never had shooters on this roster. So the triangle offense would have never worked. Derek Fisher tried to implement it into the game. It never worked. And that's why Derek Fisher didn't last too long here with the New York Knicks. The problem here is ownership. Ownership made the mistakes. Ownership was running this team before Leon Rose came in and took control of the organization. Donnie Walsh was a great GM, but he wasn't healthy. He was in a wheelchair. He was getting up there in age. He's now with Indiana, and you can see what Indiana's doing right now. Donnie Walsh didn't want to contend or deal with the one and only that's running that team and or that organization is the owner, James Dolan. So the fact here is, if I were to ask Phil Jackson, do you have anything about James Dolan in that book? Because to say that James Dolan didn't have the problems, that the team didn't have the problems that they did because of just Carmelo Anthony is ridiculous. It had something to do with ownership. It had something to do with, he had his hands dipped into everything with the New York Knicks. And that's my take with this beef and what's beef. I do believe that Carmelo Anthony handled this very, very well. I'm not going to take shots at Carmelo on the way he handled it. What I will take shots at Carmelo Anthony is that if you have thoughts, you have a podcast, say it. Don't hide it. Speak it. Speak the truth here. Let us hear your take behind it. You were trying to beat around the bush. Oh, we knew. We knew what was going on. We knew. What did you know? Spit it out. Because it's going to break now. It's going to be on every single radio show tomorrow. What is it? What did you know that nobody knows about this team and Phil Jackson? Because Phil Jackson is I remember James Dolan was giving him $16.5 million a year to do nothing. Sleep at the combine while he was supposed to watch players and what they were doing on a basketball court because that's who he was drafting. Instead, he drafted Ntilikina. Boy, oh boy, now I know why he was sleeping and he was blind. So that's my take. I don't know. I'm going to read the book. I would love to get Phil Jackson on this show. I would love it. Because I would love to hear his take on it. I would love to see Phil Jackson get interviewed by Carmelo Anthony. That would be interesting. That would be really, really interesting as far as I'm concerned. But it's interesting to me that the New York media is always brought up, and we all know what the New York media is. We know what the New York media entails. They're a bunch of nut jobs. All they're trying to do is find something that they can bite with, and then they fight with it. And to me right now, what is the media doing to the Knicks right now? Oh, they're bringing up Karl Anthony Towns' horrible fourth game of the season. Who cares? If Karl Anthony Towns averages 24 points a game, 12 assists, and average 40% at the three-point line before the All-Star break, and he makes the All-Star team like he did last year, are we going to be and the Knicks have the best record in the East, or one of the best records in basketball. Are we going to sit here and complain about what Giannis did in game number 4? The answer, not a chance in hell. So why are we talking about it? Because Giannis speaks to the media, and we all know where Giannis wanted to be, and we all know where Giannis is going if he ever becomes available. And that is the New York Knicks.